do you want the quote unquote ethos, right, and the decentralization and the ability to operate outside of the system, or do you want mass adoption? Because you can't have both.
What are some of the most exciting projects that are being built that you're focusing on at the moment?
I mean, Bitcoin, I think, still is the king and will remain the king for a long time. Then if you look through kind of, Ether, Solana, and many other ecosystems, I think that the areas where we're going to see a lot of innovation is what do you do on top of this infrastructure? So obviously, if you look at something like NFTs that really kind of took hold on Ethereum, that's now being brought over to Bitcoin. It's also obviously on Solana as well. And so not so much like that infrastructure layer. I think that's been built out and kind of was the story over the last 10 years or so. But now what are people going to build on top of it? What are those use cases? And there's a lot of work being done there.
Is there a particular area that you're most bullish on?
Bitcoin will always be the most bullish area, just 'cause I think it's got the cleanest story, right? It is a thing that is going to continue to benefit from the printing of money. I don't think they're going to stop printing money anytime soon. But then, many other areas, I think, especially when you start getting into transactions and kind of medium of exchange, the stablecoin aspect of the industry is still drastically undervalued and I think misunderstood. And so I think there'll be a lot of innovation there as well.
Can we go a little bit deeper into your thoughts on stablecoins? I know you've written a bit about it recently.
Yeah. Well, stablecoins are, probably becoming so large and important that they're now kind of too big to fail from a systemic standpoint, which is hilarious given what the legacy financial system went through with the banks in 2008, 2009. But stablecoins now do collectively as much transaction volume as Visa. They also are the 16th largest holder of U.S. Treasuries. That's really important because at the time when China and Japan, who used to buy 22% of U.S. Treasuries, are only buying about 7%. We need somebody else to step in and be those buyers of Treasury. And so whether it is Tether, USDC, or many other stablecoins, they are now becoming one of those large holders of Treasuries. And so from the U.S. government standpoint, they're really important, and we need to make sure that they continue to buy them and hold those Treasuries. At the same time, I think what you're seeing is people realize, hey, I don't want to spend my Bitcoin. I don't want to spend an asset that I think is going to go up in value over time. It serves as this great store of value. So if I do want to buy things using these new crypto rails, maybe it's better to spend the thing that's going to be worth less in the future and kind of spend the fiat money. And so it looks like there's kind of this, symbiotic relationship that is being created where Bitcoin is preserving value and stablecoins are allowing you to transact value, and they're kind of rising together.
Clear. I want to go back in time a little bit, and I want to ask you what your main motivation was to initially engage in crypto. Was it an investment thesis that you had? Was it this sort of underlying ethos? Was it maybe the potential to have a better state of affairs generally than what we had at the time? What was it that really drove you into the space full time? Yeah,
I think majority of people, not everyone, but majority of the people who say that they came for anything other than making money are full of shit. Look, that's how capitalistic societies work, right? Is economic incentives drive behavior. And one of the things that really drives how capital is allocated in an economy is because there's the promise of economic gain. And so most people, I think, who came into crypto, they probably heard about it from someone. There was kind of a word of mouth that happened. They saw, okay, I can buy something and it's going to go up in value over time. Some of that was, I'm going to go buy Bitcoin. Some of it was I'm going to buy machines and do mining. That's how I got started. But really, I think economic incentive is really, really important. And that's how great things have been built over centuries. And so I think crypto is no different than that. For me, it was a very interesting kind of journey to learning because it was, I'm going to go and this is a way to make money. And then what you start to do is you start to learn about the assets. You start to learn about the ethos. You start to understand, why is this working? Why is it so different? What is the kind of unique story here, right? Why is this technology not similar to the legacy centralized system? And then you kind of almost backwards become convinced of the ethos, but really you showed up originally because it was the economic incentive. And so I think when you kind of spit out on the other end of that system is you get people who still understand and appreciate the economic incentive. They now also appreciate and kind of embody the ethos. And so you kind of have a full, well-rounded, kind of Bitcoin or crypto holder at that point.
Just while we're on the ethos then, do you believe that the ethos that underlies the technology in the crypto industry as a whole, aside from the profit motive, has an actual potential to sort of reshape societal attitudes towards, let's say, finance and technology?
Yeah, I don't think that technology has ethos. I think people have ethos. And so when technology gets built, the way people use it or the thought process that goes into building it can kind of be shaped by ethos. But technology is technology, right? In the same way that technology is not political, it doesn't necessarily have ethos. Now, what I do think is really interesting is these technology is empowering people who have a certain set of ethos to do things in society that maybe previously weren't available. And so in the United States, being in a democratic, capitalistic society, we have a lot of benefits, right? It's the best system that's ever been created. Until there's another one created, we're kind of the winner. But I do think that there's many other places around the world where people don't have property rights. They don't have the ability to preserve their purchasing power. They don't have the ability to transact without censorship. And so these technologies are allowing them to do that. And then if you kind of zoom out, there's also this very interesting idea of just accessibility, right? How many people around the world can actually invest in the US stock market? How many people around the world can actually get access to something that will allow them to gain purchasing power rather than just sit in cash and have it eroded away? And so when you bring these technologies into the fold and the idea that anyone with an internet connection can participate, now you're actually creating access on top of kind of these ethos-driven technologies. And so from that standpoint, I think that just giving people access, we've seen with the internet particularly, is really, really powerful for a long period of time.
And so based on what you're saying, I think what you mean is that given the prevailing profit motive in crypto, particularly present during bull markets, the ability of crypto to deliver on its promise is not necessarily threatened by this profit motive, this desire to make money.
No, I think it's essential, right? If you look at every single kind of great civilization that's ever been built, the economic incentive drove a lot of it. And so I think rather than run from kind of centuries of economics, we should actually lean into it and understand what is the best marketing campaign for crypto. The price goes up. Right? People talk about it. It's the classic, when you're in the Uber and they're talking about a stock or they're talking about crypto, it's word of mouth. It's driving kind of awareness. It's driving marketing. And so, again, that doesn't mean that just because the price goes up that an asset is going to have long-term sustainability or resilience. It doesn't mean that if, your barber starts telling you about an asset, you should go buy it. But that is really the marketing campaign is if you want to increase awareness, you need the price to go up. And so, one of the best memes in the Bitcoin world is just number go up technology, right? And so I think that people want to try to take the moral high ground and say, oh, I'm not here to make money. Well, if you're not here to make money, then why is all of your money in this asset? Right. And so I think that rather than try to hide or run away from it, just understand, look, it's actually essential to have the economic incentive, right? The free market demands an economic incentive in order to get the outcome. And so don't be ashamed of that. Actually, what we should do is we should go tell as many people as possible, hey, there is a opportunity for you to do this. Now, do the research, do the work, understand what this stuff is. But really, that economic incentive leads to learning and education. And if you look at kind of the American population, 50% of Americans don't have any investments, right? They get hurt by inflation really, really badly. That's not a poverty problem. That's not a kind of any other problem than just education. They don't know that you shouldn't save, that you should invest. And so I think that Bitcoin and crypto has really done a great job of educating a lot of people about economics. And the more that we can tell the people who don't know, the better off they'll likely be.
Absolutely. And speaking of marketing for crypto, do you try to convert others or do you try and bring normies into the space? Would you consider yourself a bit of a crypto evangelist?
Outside of talking to crypto people, I don't talk about Bitcoin or crypto at all. Maybe it's because I just talk about it all the time with people that I deal with in my professional life. But I think folks are surprised, when they go to dinner or I meet someone for the first time, I almost never talk about it. And, it's one of these things where maybe personality-wise, I don't believe in like kind of overselling people and trying to convince them. I just am a big believer that people kind of, they buy at the price they deserve. People who are intellectually curious will ask questions. I have many interests, right? I'm not just interested in this stuff. And so I don't necessarily spend 100% of my time talking about it. But I am thankful for the people who do that, right? There are people who that's literally, every single person they talk to, they tell them about it, they explain it, et cetera. Maybe they're just better at doing it than I am. And so happy that those people exist as well.
Do you have any funny anecdotes of people trying to convert you without realizing that you're already in the space?
No, I think people now, when they meet me, they pretty much know, hey, he's into this stuff. But I think the probably funnier thing is you can tell kind of where someone is in their journey of learning based on the questions that they're asking.
Right.
And so many times people will, well, hey, have you thought about this, or have you thought about that? And if they take it too far, it's the classic, I just learned about Bitcoin and I'm here to fix it. But I think most people are trying their best to learn, and so there's this natural kind of progression of, well, what is the government going to do, or how does this work? Could somebody hack the network? And so you can kind of just try to pick out how long they've been paying attention and learning about this stuff based on the questions.
I want to zoom out for a second and ask a slightly broader question about markets. Given that crypto operates in this very pronounced cyclical pattern, there's massive highs and people love it, and there's massive lows and people get devastated. What do you think the impact of this cyclicality is on the crypto industry, and more importantly, do you see it changing over time?
Yeah, I actually think that it's incredibly important, right? Because again, boom and bust cycles are how things get built. And so if you go back and you look at how cities have been built, countries have been built, other technology industries, et cetera, basically you need those boom times to draw capital in. Again, the economic incentive takes over. That allows you to build infrastructure, that allows you to hire people, that allows the companies to thrive, that allows for profits to be generated, kind of all these different components of a boom cycle. And then what happens is it gets overheated, and so you need some sort of correction. It actually would be very worrisome if there weren't boom and bust, right? That would mean that the free market isn't working. For some reason, somebody has put their hand over the market and has actually stopped either the boom times or the self-correcting bust times. And so having this healthy kind of periods of expansion and then contraction, what is healthy about that in crypto specifically is each time that there's a contraction, the net gain from the last one is still large. And so we use the boom and bust to continue to grow. But if you just kind of grew to the sky forever in terms of all these metrics and capital, et cetera, it would mean one really, really big bust at the end. And so actually having these kind of periodic every couple of year contraction periods is pretty healthy.
Clear. And do you think the industry is moving faster or slower than it used to? Is there sort of a major change in that sense that you've noticed over the years?
I definitely think it's moving faster, and it's also bifurcating or kind of fragmenting. So it used to be that me in a single day, I could understand everything that was happening in the industry, right? And I would kind of see all the updates, and I would be able to cover everything from Bitcoin all the way down to kind of the corners of the industry and kind of where R&D and innovation was happening. Now, if you look inside of some of these funds, for example, you can't just have one team that is investing in crypto. You have specialized teams. So you have people who are focused on NFTs, you have people who are focused on DeFi, you have people who are focused on infrastructure, on Bitcoin, et cetera. And so I think that specialization gives this feeling of like we're moving faster, but it's less about the speed that we're moving forward, and it's more about these different parts of the ecosystem pulling in different directions and kind of specialization. And then from a speed perspective, yeah, I think that not only are we moving faster in the sense of you just have more people and more capital at work, and so if you do that, you should be moving faster. Actually, it would be a negative signal if you had 5, 10, 20 X more people working on something and you weren't moving at a faster pace. And so when you put those two things together, you get a fragmentation, and then you also get an enhancement in speed. You get true innovation. You get kind of progress. And I think that's exactly what we've been seeing over the last couple of years.
Speaking of progress, what do you think really happened behind the scenes to get this Ethereum ETF approved much faster than many people anticipated?
It's impossible to know, but at least from the outside, what it looks like is that Donald Trump positioned himself as the pro-crypto candidate. I think there was a number of different people that probably had a hand in that. It looks like Vivek Ramaswamy, Ryan Selkis, David Bailey, a few others, kind of started to explain it to him. I think that Trump appears to be somebody who really understands, hey, give the people what they want. And so if there's 50 million Americans who hold an asset, probably going to be pretty hard to be the anti-crypto candidate. And so by taking the position and kind of being first to draw, if you will, as the pro-crypto candidate, and being pretty explicit about it, right? I mean, literally giving speeches saying, hey, if you own crypto, you should vote for me because I'm going to protect your right to own these assets. It really is a game theory with the other side. And so Democrats, and specifically the Biden administration, I think has to make a decision. Are we going to really cede the crypto point to kind kind of our adversary? Are we going to be the anti-crypto candidate in administration when there's 50 million potential votes that are kind of hanging in the balance, and these people are passionate, they're loud, they have distribution, they're explicitly saying publicly that they are single issue voters. That's a pretty big constituent base. And so how do you negate your adversary from being kind of the pro-crypto candidate and you being the opposite? You become the pro-crypto candidate. And so I think that's really what you're seeing is you're getting bipartisan support now from both sides of the aisle, where people ultimately are managing their kind of voting, their perspective, and their career on not being on the wrong side of history. So if you want to be on the right side of history, you see the momentum, you see that the other side is taking a position, you kind of are forced to do the same. And I think that we're just now starting to see that happen. And ultimately for the industry, it's a positive, right? These technologies are apolitical. They aren't on one side or the other. I think it's important to have all Americans and their representatives kind of behind the technology. And it seems like that's what we're going to get.
Do you think the US is moving in the right direction in terms of bringing regulatory clarity to digital assets?
I think the United States moves slow, but it gets it right in the end. And, it doesn't get it right always in the first try. But again, if you look at kind of where are the, capital of capital markets, it's the United States, right? What is the shining light on the hill? It's the United States. Where do investors feel most secure? It's in the United States. Where do they feel like there's the least amount of fraud? It's in the United States, right? And so, again, the U.S. has had many iterations. They've got a lot of stuff wrong. We could always be better. But the United States is probably the best financial system that we have so far. It's the best economy in terms of our resilience and our ability to allocate capital and kind of drive returns and recycle that capital through our society. And so I think that crypto is no different, right? We're slow. Some people would argue we're methodical. I think crypto says we're slow because we wanted to go faster, but we're trying to get it right. And I think there's a lot of people, both in the regulatory bodies and also the politicians, that are working to try to understand this stuff, right? This is not 100% of their full-time job, right? They have many, many other issues that they're dealing with. And so our job as an industry is to educate them, to help them, kind of get their questions answered, to guide them in terms of what maybe could be missteps. And I just have faith that the United States will get it right over the long run. It could be a bumpy ride, right? But it's kind of, if you're trying to land a plane, yeah, there might be some turbulence, but as long as the most important thing is get on the ground safely. And I think that that's where the United States is headed.
Clear. You mentioned capital allocation there. How do you see the relationship between TradFi and DeFi evolving over the next 5 years or even a decade? And specifically, some people call this a marriage of TradFi and DeFi. Some people call it a collision. Do you have any vocabulary that you choose to describe that as? And how do you see it evolving over the next years? Depends
on who you ask, right? Some people think it's a collision because they're the ones who are going to end up on the wrong side of the wreckage. Some people are looking at it as this marrying because they're going to benefit from it. Maybe the kind of the best way to describe it is just there's a blending of the two, right? That there's now, rather than it being black and white, we're getting much more of a gray area. And eventually, I think that we'll just call it all finance. Right? Like that is where we're headed, this is all just finance. And so the same way that a stock market may be different from another stock market, there's going to be crypto exchanges that start to add, right? Coinbase just added futures for oil and gold. We now see New York Stock Exchange, we see CBOE and many other organizations all talking about, well, maybe we should start looking at spot trading of crypto. We see the ETFs being very kind of popular. There's many exchanges around the world that are now becoming very crypto friendly. And so if you look and you sit there as an investor, you say to yourself, I don't care what all the nomenclature is. I don't care what kind of these false, walls that have been built. What I care about is I have economic value that I need to either protect or grow. And how do I allocate that capital accordingly? And obviously there are millions of people around the world who are thinking about this problem on a daily basis, trying to figure it out. But now they understand this crypto potential solution is something to evaluate. Doesn't mean everyone's going to go buy it, but does mean that is now part of the conversation, which I think is really one kind of milestone of the maturation of the industry.
And what do you think the impact of institutional adoption of crypto is going to be on the broader crypto ecosystem then?
It's going to get a lot more serious. A lot of the unserious people in the industry will eventually become irrelevant just because the law of large numbers, you're going to have more people. So the minority kind of group that has helped get us here is just going to become a smaller and smaller percentage. Also from a capital base, their capital will be smaller as well as an overall pool. I think that anytime you have fixed, kind of supply asset like Bitcoin, you have more capital come in, the US dollar exchange price is going to go up. But I also think in these other industries or other parts of the industry, there's going to be a lot more people. There's going to be a lot more technology built. There's going to be a lot more capital that flows in. And so it's all a tailwind. What I do think that is really important is kind of there's this balance between, the almost like libertarian or anarchist kind of decentralization, take down the Fed, take down the country, take down the state, all these things. It's very hard to do that when BlackRock owns a lot of Bitcoin, right? Or Fidelity. And so I do think that Bitcoiners and or crypto participants, there's kind of this like catch-22. Do you want the quote unquote ethos, right, and the decentralization and the ability to operate outside of the system, or do you want mass adoption? Because you can't have both. And I think that's ultimately what we're watching play out here is that, again, the economic incentive is for the mass adoption to happen. And so the technology is valuable. Wall Street and Washington, D.C. both have recognized that. And so what you're going to get is you're going to get mass adoption and you're getting a watering down of the ethos. And again, a part of me says, hey, I like the ethos. I like some of the ideas of decentralization and censorship resistance, et cetera. And maybe we can hold on to some of that, but there definitely is a watering down. And you even see this, right? Some of the most hardcore Bitcoin maximalists now, all of a sudden, they saying some pretty nice things about, the Ether ETF, right? They start talking about going from like everything else is a zero to, oh, well, this is going to be an asset class. And so the market has basically slapped their wrist and pushed them back into kind of where the market is going to go. And so I tend to think that we should not, yell and scream at those people and say, oh, you were wrong. Instead, hey, they're intelligent. They got new facts. They're changing their mind. And so the more that we can see people do that in the coming years, I think the better we'll be.
And as an intelligent investor, what are your hopes and aspirations for the crypto space in the coming years?
I just hope that people are able to protect their economic power. And, we live in a world where maybe 50 years ago, if you talk to your grandparents, they would tell you you can save your way to financial security. We can't do that today because every currency around the world is being debased at an accelerated rate. And so the ability to not only protect that purchasing power, but also grow and grow faster than inflation, I think is really important. And so if you have that economic use case, that alone would be pretty powerful, is to just give people their purchasing power and let them protect it. But then you start to accelerate that into using the same technologies for the technology revolution. And are we going to be able to give power to people, right? This idea of digital property rights. It's not just about money. It also could be things for your data. It could be, kind of different use cases. And so the more that we can onboard people to this brand new technology, I think the better the world will be. But, it's not about kind of a platitude that people would just say, oh, the world's going to be better. We need builders. We need people who are willing to actually go out and build these solutions, solve real problems. And I think that's kind of the messy details that a lot of people forget about in conversation.
Speaking of the builders that we need, for anyone who's looking to build a business or be a better investor, let's say in the crypto space, what advice would you give them today?
Yeah, if I've got to convince you to be a builder, you probably shouldn't start. Right. I think that most people who end up building things that are valuable, they're just called to it. Right. They see a problem. They want to solve the problem and they go and they take the initiative. They have high agency. They're kind of a self-starter. For the people that I've seen who, kind of say, well, I want to own my own business and I'm going to go and I'm going to try to figure out some way to make money. Money's a really, really bad motivator because what ends up happening is there will be easier ways to make money in the bad times. And so you end up quitting. And if you look at most of the companies that have shut down over the years in crypto, it's usually the founders giving up. Right? Some of the best companies in the world, if you go back and you look at some of the things that they went through, there was incredible persistence and resilience from those founders. And so I do think that founding a technology company in particular really requires someone who wants to do it, not for money, but to solve a problem. And as an investor, it's almost impossible to try to sniff that out. Over time, you try to get better at it, but the motivations that people actually have is pretty difficult to underrate. And then from an investor seat, I think the key is that actually the timeless investing principles apply here, right? And so when people see kind of something new and shiny, they get really excited. Like, oh, I can just go and I'm going to get rich, right? Again, the economic incentive takes over, human greed. But I do think that the idea of buying great assets and holding them for a long period of time, kind of the classic Buffett or Berkshire mentality is literally codified in Bitcoin, right? Is the ability to buy these assets and just dollar cost average, hold for a long period of time tends to work here as well. And so this time is not different, whether you're building a company or you're investing. Instead, you have to understand kind of the old world and the things that have worked for a long time, but also apply them to this new industry.
And finally, can you give us some alpha?
Learn. Just learn. The more you learn, I think the better off that you are. When it comes to kind of alpha, usually when people tell me things like, oh, I've got this, whatever, it's one of three things. Either it's something that, yeah, sure, maybe it exists as an advantage, but it's usually pretty short-lived. The second thing is that it's actually not an advantage. There's some sort of like ulterior motive that they're telling me through. Or the third thing is they've just done the work incorrectly. And so I always tell folks that, have some sort of buy this thing or here's this strategy or whatever. I say, if this is so profitable, why are you not rich, right? And so a lot of the quote unquote alpha, I think, tends to be focused on, short-termism and things that end up not actually working over the long run. Instead, I think that if people just invest in themselves, they learn, it's probably the single greatest compounding factor in who ends up being successful and who doesn't in both investing and building companies.